Welcome to the Grow Your Law Firm podcast, brought to you by Pilma. This podcast helps lead lawyers to more growth, profit, and freedom. Here is your legal marketing expert and host, Ken Hardison.
Well, hello, everyone. This is Ken Hardison. Welcome to another episode of Grow Your Law Firm. And today we have the pleasure of having Jan Roos, the owner of CaseFuel. And very interesting fellow. I was on his podcast. He has his own podcast, and he really is, when it comes to online marketing, and I think any kind of marketing, is a very, very smart genius, almost, I would say. And he thinks outside the box, and I like that. I've always felt like that's what you got to do to be ahead of the curve, and that's what we try to do here at Pilma, keep our lawyers ahead of the curve. And so I asked him, would he be on my podcast? And he graciously accepted. So thank you, Jan, for being here today, my friend.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ken. I also thanks for the really kind words, the introduction. And, I've been listening to your podcast a lot recently too. So looking forward to being a participant this time. So thanks for that.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about you, because I just kind of touched on it. I just tell them how smart you were, but tell me back.
Okay. So yeah, basically, long story short, I'm a marketing guy. The way that I got into this was after my first business. I basically started a business right out of college, and we ended up getting some grant money for it. I started that, and the first time I ended up trying to market it, we were doing a consumer product. So a couple interesting things we learned. The first thing that I learned after I invested in a marketing consultant to help us out with Google AdWords is that it was really easy to lose your shirt hiring marketing consultants. So this is about like maybe 6 months in, and I got really ticked off because this guy ended up taking our money. And I mean, I wouldn't say he took it, but he was an earnest fellow. But basically, we spent a bunch of money on Google AdWords. I didn't hear from the guy until it was time to ask for the retainer for month 2. So I'm like, okay, this is kind of messed up. And I was kind of, I wouldn't say enraged by it, but it motivated me to figure this stuff out and, essentially in-house this. And then basically we ended up scaling that business up. We were really super early on Amazon. We were doing some pretty, highfalutin Facebook funnels to email, subscription upsells back in like 2013. So I honestly think we were too early for that. But basically we got to the point where we kind of reached saturation. We were operating in a couple of really small markets, and I decided to move on to the next thing. So I ended up sort of being a business builder with no business for some time. And I was like, well, hey, look, I figured out some pretty cool stuff with this marketing thing. So maybe I could go ahead and do this for other businesses. So it actually wasn't attorneys in the beginning. But this is kind of funny. I just remember the story. So so we had a couple of different things that I started out in the beginning. So my natural guess was to go for the most complicated thing. It's like, okay, well, if I have the smallest Venn diagram of things that people want to do, that certainly must be the most valuable because it's the most complicated. Absolutely not the case. So the stuff that I was trying to do as far as the more complicated Facebook, email, blah, 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 like comprehensive stuff, attracted not the right kind of person. The other thing is they're really hard to get results quickly. But the thing is that the paid traffic component got results really quickly. And just being a person with, I had the track record I had of building the business, but no one really knew me from Adam. So basically, there wasn't a ton of trust in that. And it was a really, really easy way to sell, because I could say, hey, look, we got the paid traffic. You'll know whether in a week this is working or not. Don't even take my word for it, right? That was when I started out with a guarantee too. It was kind of funny. We have that in common. So I was like, hey, look, if it doesn't work out, I'll give you your money back. I don't know what to tell you. It's the best I could do for you. So anyways, I was kind of trying to settle this in, and I always knew. It's kind of funny. And this was maybe just like me being too dumb to know any better. I was like, well, I think this personal injury stuff is the way that ended up happening is like, you always knew, like when I was learning Google AdWords for the first time, everyone talked about how crazy those cost per clicks were. And I was at the time, classic Jan, I was listening to a podcast while sending an email, crossing a street in downtown Manhattan. And I looked up and there was a car coming my way. So thankfully I was able to kind of I was able to bounce off the bumpers. I didn't get flattened or anything like that. But basically that was my intro to cold email every personal injury attorney in New York City. So I said, hey, I was crossing the street on Essex. I ended up getting dinged, and I was looking up some attorneys, and hey, by the way, I noticed like, you're directing your ad to the homepage. You ever considered like, what your cost per lead consequence? And, that's how I signed my first client. So it was a big guy. This dude actually, I can't say his name. I mean, it was a long time ago. We actually worked together for a while. But yeah, we started doing my first campaign ever for construction accidents in New York City on Google AdWords. And I'd known a lot. So the one thing that I did take from that complicated, Rube Goldberg set of bag of tricks that I had was the landing page stuff. And at the time, and we're talking about 2015 right now, that was a pretty big leg up at the time for Google AdWords. And like our claim to fame was we were doing a lot of long tail stuff. We made separate landing pages for all the different things. So where everyone would say, oh, hey, you get a landing page and you have your landing page, which works, but we do the car accident landing page and the wrongful death landing page and the slip and fall landing page. And that got us really good conversion numbers. And yeah, I mean, long story short, we were able to take that for a long time. So we had some great partnerships. Over the years, though, it's kind of like the trend is I like kind of doing. I'm on the Colby Index. I'm an 8 quick start, so I really get a lot of energy from starting things, and then as things kind of mature, I like to scale them out and kind of move on. But at the same time, it was kind of getting tough with Google because basically, they still have made some changes that I'm not a huge fan of. Oh, whoopsies, there goes my mic. Anyway, so Google made a couple of changes that I wasn't super fan of, and then it just was getting more and more competitive. So I was thinking to myself, like, what's the next thing? And I kind of went back to it. And the thing is, like, I missed a couple really important years in Facebook. So I think I got in, we were doing this stuff around 2012, 2013. I got back into Google, or I got back into Facebook around 2018. I kind of missed a big part of that ramp up, unfortunately. But basically I saw that, there was kind of an opportunity because the AdWords stuff was really good, but there was one practice area that we never had a good time of like closing, and it was basically trust and estate stuff. So I mean, the difference between that and personal injury, and again, a lot of law firms, in my opinion, is that like you have a personal injury person coming to you, that's a hair on fire problem. They don't care, like they don't care about it before it happens, and then after it happens, it's all they care about until they get it resolved. So you absolutely need, well, and it's very, very helpful to be in front of them in the moment of that decision. Like it's a very aware market. But what we had, the same feedback that we got from stuff like trust and estates was that's okay. Well, I think on average, most people are going to try to plan to get their last will and testament in order. If they're optimizing it, like from an engineering perspective, they get that thing signed the day before they drop dead. So right. Anytime before is just spending money earlier than you have to in the eyes of most consumers, right? But at the same time, it's an opportunity because there's a lot of people, and it is the kind of situation where so when you're using that channel of waiting until somebody types in estate planning attorney Los Angeles, then you have the benefit of somebody knowing they have a problem, but you have the drawback of them having access to all these other attorneys. So the problem that we saw our estate planning attorneys facing was that they were dealing with price shoppers. And if they didn't pick up the phone the first time, and there's absolutely people who crush it on pay-per-click, I think intake is one of the most important things for that domain. But even if you do, it's, the price competition doesn't go away. But when we're kind of looking into that, so, okay, we have the combination of a market that's less aware. So Facebook was a good fit for that. And then we were actually, this is okay. So I had terrible timing for missing 2014 through 2017 on Facebook. I had excellent timing, not because of anything smart I did, but basically we're like, this seems really, really good. We're going to just focus on this heading into 2020. So basically we're all, it was all hands on deck on getting that program like stocked up, got a bunch of people in it. We're closing a lot of deals. And then basically COVID hits in March. And we had a couple of these. And one of the things that I noticed too, and this sort of validated this whole theory on this, but like the seminar model has been working for so long in estate planning. And whenever we were prospecting, we noticed that the biggest firms in any region had the seminars tab on their page. And the reason that works, I think, is just because it's one of those situations where if you educate people, a lot of people will say, oh my God, well, I don't want my family to go through probate, or I don't want to have nursing home bankruptcy. I better get this sorted out. So I think a lot of that, the marketing works out for that reason. But basically we had some of those firms and they were closing, 50, sometimes a lot more than that, different trusts a month. And they're also, the governor tells them that they can't hold events, right? So like, John, what do we do? And this was a really, really fun month. So we're talking about like March or April. And yeah, there was a lot of late nights with the team there, but we came out on the other end of it with basically adapting this seminar model to a webinar model and basically just really, really focusing on honing in that product. And we've basically been running with that ever since. And basically, COVID's been kind of fantastic for it. I know things are sort of cooling off as far as that goes, but the cost per lead, the positioning that people have going into their consult calls. And then the other thing too is that we figured out a lot of stuff. Every single time, it's like, I'm a huge believer in the phrase new levels, new devils. So anything that we do for clients today has been the limiting factor at some point in the past. So, without going into crazy detail, there's a lot of other stuff that we do, but that's kind of the
Yeah,
story how we
yeah.
got here.
Something that I think our listeners can learn from this is these estate attorneys, uh, basically their golden goose was doing these seminars, and then when COVID hit, you couldn't do the little seminars and the live seminars and have to take people out to dinner, and so their pipeline of new cases are gone. And I know they're sitting there scratching their head, and the smart ones, it sound like, pivoted and hired you and started doing these seminars, webinars, or whatever online, and and you knew how to get them there with your marketing expertise to get them to these things. And I guess did you use some program like Stealth Webinar or Stealth Seminar? They got some programs out there like that, I think.
Yeah. So this is another huge benefit that like we kind of didn't realize. So I think when we did the first batch of our webinar clients, a lot of these were those people in that situation. I've been running a seminar 3 times a week for the last 5 years. Like, what do we do now? So it was kind of to replace that gap, but that's platforms like Stealth Seminar, and there's a couple other ones too. I think we use Stealth Seminar, Easy Webinar, Demio is another one. They all more or less do it's kind of Coke and Pepsi. But another huge benefit of that is that you don't have to show up 3 times a week. Like, it's kind of crazy. I see people that are spending tremendous amounts of money on Facebook and then they have a Zoom link on their thing. I'm like, you could do it. And then the other thing too, and like, look, this is a little inside baseball, but from a Facebook ads perspective, when you're able to continuously run an event, Facebook likes data. So when people are running, a 3-day ad campaign every single time they have to do a live webinar, you're not really getting any learnings out of that. So the Stealth Seminar thing, I think, is one of those huge win-wins of technology, because you have the ability to make life easier for yourself. Who doesn't like that? But also, you're giving a platform in Facebook what it needs to optimize your campaign with its really, really powerful, optimization algorithm.
Yeah, so I think you hit on with something, and I'm sure these estate lawyers, they want to keep doing. They're probably doing both now.
Yeah. Depends on where it is. So like, it's, I feel like the rollout's kind of happening differently in different parts of the country. And it's honestly more of like I would say cultural thing, depending on different places. Like, we got seminars running alongside webinars in like Texas. We don't have those going in Cape Cod right now. When the time comes and, it becomes cool. I mean, the things that it's kind of interesting too, because we basically, it's really weird. So like we had I guess leading before, this is something I kind of breezed over, but like we were using more of a direct to, booking sort of situation before the seminar things were or the webinars were an opportunity. But after getting the webinars to crack, we ended up going back into getting the seminars with similar ads, similar landing pages, that sort of situation. So yeah, we actually have those going too. And the thing that's been interesting from that as well is most people, I would say the firms that are doing the best with the seminar model were ones that had like a consistent advertising method. I would say the most common one, bar none, was direct mail. So pretty much, people who are in the direct mail tradition generally have a pretty good grasp on their numbers. So we can look up what it looks up like, what's the cost of a family, or I guess a buying unit, I think is the term, buying you this versus buying it. And again, granted, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. You have a less chance of somebody showing up if they sign up from the internet than from a postcard, but you can factor that into the cost. And then basically, with anything else, and like, if we're thinking about like a multi-channel approach as well, there's always situations where you have things that are more cost effective than other ones, but there's also scale and there's also diversity. If you can get something that's going to be a little bit more expensive, but you can fold that over 10 times, that's a channel that's worth having. It's a tool that's worth having in your toolbox. If you have one that's going to be effective, but you can only spend $500 a month.
You know, Jan, and this has been years and years ago. I'd say, man, I've been doing this way too long. Probably 25 years ago. I used to run newspaper ads. This is back when people read newspapers. Okay. This is back when Yellow Pages was good too, right? I ran a newspaper ad, and I would do a seminar at the local hotel and have some snacks and stuff. Sort of like what the estate attorneys were doing. Maybe not quite as classy, but and I would do it for workers' comp uh, claimants, because a lot of them scared to do anything, but really don't know their rights. And we wouldn't get a big crowd, but every time we did it, I'd sign up at least one or two people, and I'd do a little like 15, 30-minute presentation and answer a lot of questions. And they just didn't know what they didn't know. And everybody's telling them different things. And what was so funny about it, I'd run it in out-of-town papers. They would come to my town because they didn't want nobody to know that they were all scared about, they didn't want to lose their
Right.
job, right? And so it worked out beautifully for several years until people quit reading the newspaper, and I just don't know if that would work now, though. I don't know if it would work in the seminars, but it's something to think about.
I mean, I'll tell you what, the thing is, and like, I know, we focused on the estate planning stuff, and that's not the only thing it works for though. Like, and I think like the big thing that's the possibility as far as this is where there's a gap in the knowledge, right? The thing is, people don't want to if people don't know that they have the option, the big difference between Google and Facebook, my opinion, is it's a pull marketing versus push marketing. We have to wait until somebody's internally made the decision to type in estate planning attorney before we can possibly serve them an ad on Google. Same thing with somebody who's looking into workers' comp. If they're not typing that in because they don't think they can do it, then we need to give them, there's a possibility to take that step towards them, push marketing, and have the situation where we can compel them to at least listen to the message. And you did that beautifully in that strategy, right? You captured their attention with the ad. You gave them a reason to see you, if nothing else, for the snacks. And then when you got them in the room, you told them something that was at least compelling enough for a couple of them to decide to move forward. And I also think too, like, not to get too moral about the whole thing. I think it's fantastic work when people are going out there and pulling these things out, because that's somebody that is, you're going there to help somebody that wouldn't actually help themselves, right? I think that's like I say, it's a kind of a noble form of marketing. It's challenging. There's a lot of steps, but you're able to kind of impact in a way that you're kind of pushing the narrative in a way that people aren't talking about before, which I think is important.
Yeah, I mean, it just depends. It's like when I used to do the infomercials where I would get interviewed. I'd write a book, and I'd get interviewed about it. And I also gave out my books at those seminars too. That helped too.
Mm-hmm.
People that later on, they might come back and hire us. But it worked so much better with Social Security than it did with PI.
Yeah. And then, yeah. And I can imagine. Yeah. But yeah, because it's like the time that you can apply for that is probably a much larger window too. It's like, if you have to be in front of that person with the book in the week after they had like the PI situation, and it's just statistically, it's less likely that you're going to find a person on that day. Right.
Yeah. I used to run them real late for people that were, we try to do it that way. People that were hurting, usually they stay up late at night, sleep during the day.
Well, I'll also say something too, though. And like, I mean, this is part of the story that I know from listening to you, other than having you on my podcast, Ken, is just that like we have a situation where you guys did tremendous amounts of follow-up. So the way that I always kind of like compare it to with like contrasting these two different approaches, and just to like kind of circle back to like the reason I nerd about this so much is that I think most people in legal marketing are talking about that pull type of marketing, right? And the way that I compare it is like basically closing somebody from a Google ad or a television commercial, a radio ad, or a billboard. It's like when you get that person on the line, it's like a full back dive. Like you got your third and inches, like you got to send your biggest guy out there. It's like, your big budgets, and you either blast through, you don't make it, right? Doing those other situations and going a little bit farther out in the funnel, it's like doing a full punt return, right? You need different teams for that. It's going to take a lot longer time, and you got to get a lot of things that are orchestrating. And I think it's kind of tough for a lot of people to pull off, especially from the jump, because you can't really tell whether, you can see, and the way that people look at this in the most part is, did I close the deal or not? Is my checking account going up or not? Which is like, okay, well, did they score the touchdown or not? We don't know whether the guy caught the ball on the punt return, whether the quarterback was throwing anywhere on the field, whether the running back had their shoes tied, or like so many ways it can go wrong. But when you get it to work out, it's something that a lot of people don't know how to do. And you don't have to go out there and duke it out with the big, paying $200 a click and, or maybe it's $150 per lead now because we have local service ads. Like, over time, these things get found out pretty quickly. So.
Absolutely. I mean, I agree with you. Let me ask you this. What do you think the biggest problem is that you see clients running into when they make when making a return on their marketing investment?
Yeah. So the thing is, there's a lot of situations that, like, kind of going back on that football conversation, right? There's a lot of ways that things can potentially go wrong. And I think without having the ability, it's like, going backwards from the point where somebody's writing you a check. And I'll just use estate planning because it's something that, I'm pretty familiar with. So, for somebody to sign a check, you have to have a consultation with them. For somebody to have a consultation with you, you have to book a consultation. For somebody to book a consultation, you have to call them and get them on the phone in most instances. And for somebody to get on the phone, you have to have a reason to call them, right? So there's all these different places that people can go wrong. And for the most part, there's not a lot of legibility in like the different parts of the process. A super common thing, and this is why I focused on this so much in the last couple of years, since, starting actually before we got the estate planning stuff, but it really kind of dialed in once we had one super thing to focus on. But what we experience a lot as marketers and this is just like a really, really weird, frustrating thing. So if you look back to me 3-4 years ago, we had a situation where we were closing clients, and we had situations when we were using campaigns in different cities. And we have one person that's getting, pretty close cost per lead, and one person saying, "Oh my God, this is the best thing ever. I'm telling all my friends, triple my budget." And other people saying, "I don't know how you guys sleep at night. This is the worst deals I've ever had." It's the same campaign. So a lot of the times what people want to look at is stuff that's kind of external. And this is one of the things too. Like, I have to deal with, not to say I have to deal with this, but this is a challenge in like leading people on the own team too. It's like, basically you have all kinds of different circumstances that you can focus on a day-to-day basis. And I think the biggest thing standing in front of people's ROI is taking ownership over it, right? You're going to get the amount of leads that you're going to get, right? And they're going to be, you can say whatever you want. The people have different markets. So you can say, sometimes, "Oh, this is bad. I don't think this would work in my market." Something we hear all the time, right? Not from active clients, more so from people that we're prospecting. But, it's like, so, okay, so we got two options here. Either you're in a bad market. I don't know why you live there. I don't know why you've been working there. Obviously, you've been running a practice for so long. Or you can say, well, there are challenges to this market, and here's how I can overcome them. But most people don't take that first step to acknowledge that they have control in the process in the first place, which I think is the biggest thing. I honestly believe if somebody wants to keep their eyes open, look at the process that they're following, iterate when they don't get feedback that's working for them, and then have the bravery to do the different thing the next time, move forward. I honestly think success is inevitable with those conditions. But most people, it's very convenient to not look at that in the first place, I think.
One of the things, I don't know if we've talked about this before, but one of the things that I would, I got friends that are doing SEO and different pay-per-click campaigns and different things and different marketing for lawyers. And it's like you said, they're running the same campaign and they're getting about the same amount of leads, getting this lawyer 200 leads, getting this lawyer 250 leads. The lawyer with 200 leads is closing 50 of them. The lawyer with 250 leads is closing 10 of them. Okay, so you know what's wrong, right?
Yeah.
It's the intake. It's the intake. That's where I see, and no lawyers want to admit it. I don't know if because every time we talk about it, they say, "I sign up every case I want." And I think they do, but they don't talk to every potential client that calls their office or fills out a form. They got staff doing it. They got associates doing it. And I can promise you, that's why I started this new business called lawyerghostcalls.com. And we do ghost calls and we record them and grade them. And I'm telling you, some of them, the lawyers are embarrassed that I've seen what their people are doing. And they're good lawyers. I mean, they're great lawyers, and they got sell, but their people just aren't doing it. I mean,
Yeah.
And I don't know that they're not training them. I'm just saying they're not holding them accountable.
Well, this is a situation I see all the time too, where it's like, and you bring a really good point, because it's like the whole close rate thing is a very flexible definition. Do you close every single person who fills out a form on your site? That'd be really impressive. Do you close everyone who makes up to the signing meeting? Probably a little bit less impressive. And people usually will kind of, do whatever they need to do to feel good on that day, right? But the situation too is like, you're talking about the lawyer that's doing 50 versus 10. Maybe the person who's doing 10 is making a return on investment. That could be fine. But it's like one of those situations, like, when you're at the bar and you're eating chicken wings with somebody, there's always that one guy who takes one tiny bite of the chicken wing and puts it back on the plate. We're like, come on, man, there's meat on the bone. Like, don't complain that you're not full at the end of the day. Like, you didn't go after it. But I also think, as far as the intake stuff, some people have a serious analytics challenge. Like, there's a couple of situations, and we actually had to be really clever about this, because early in the back in the day, we lost some deployments over this. And it's like, the incentives in place for a lot of intake professionals, and again, a lot of people are never getting the the respect of being an intake professional. Usually they have a much more diminutive title, or it's not glorious work for the most part. You pick any Fortune 500 company, the person who's paid highest other than the CEO is probably the head salesperson. So the people that are responsible for bringing business, again, there's absolutely a huge advantage to being a lawyer doing the consultation, but you don't have consultations until those people tee them up for you. But for the most part, it's thankless work, and that's usually the lowest paid individual in most law offices that we talk about. And what are the incentives? Oh wow, I'd love to stay until 7 o'clock, dial all these extra leads, and if I get this to work, then I have more work to do tomorrow. Or, let me rearrange the alphabetization on the file cabinet. Like, what are you going to do? It's just like, and we have the situation where the incentive, like, you got a fox guarding the hen house, right? And it's like, the thing is, I don't even think I don't think a lot of intake people are malicious. It's just, they don't even, it's not convenient to look at the things that don't serve you, right? So it's like, okay, well, this is the thing. You have to have everything work in place. If you want to invest in a new marketing channel, I hate to say it, you have to start from a set of new assumptions. If you're used to closing, if you're used to closing referrals and that's all you've been closing for the last 5 years, you want to go to any kind of paid marketing, you got to assume that person's going to be a little less educated than the people that are finding you on a billboard or whatever happens to be, right? But basically, if so, to kind of treat it with beginner's eyes, there's a lot of hard work that has to do. It's going to be scary the first time. You're going to get rejection, and it's easier to say, well, I don't think this was going to work anyways, or these leads are crap, or this doesn't work in my market. It's very, like, satisfying your ego to say that, but it's not going to make you any more money. So, and the thing is, we can't even, for most people in intake position, I feel so bad for them, because they're not going to be making any money for it anyways. Right. So it's like, we have situations, I don't know how you feel about this, but we recently, we have an ISA program that we came up with this for helping some people out. And it was just basically, it's, fractional, intake professional type situation. Best thing we did on that, we gave those guys a bounty, right? You guys close more deals. Whenever a client gets a closed deal, you get XYZ dollars, right? So now it's the same list of people. It's the same conversation you have to have, but who's going to ask the extra question that gets, who's going to take no for an answer? Who's going to handle the objection? The person who has got something in it, right? And I think it's been pretty helpful for us. But just an idea too. Like, these people are doing a lot. A good intake person is a great asset in your business. The return on investment on one of those people can be absolutely fantastic.
Absolutely. I've said it. I tell people, even solo practitioners, I said, hire a full-time intake person and let them do other stuff, but their main job is to take every call, every inquiry. I said, because they'll pay for themselves 10 times over. So
Yeah.
you'll convert more cases than you and your secretary are doing now. I promise you. I got one last question. We're running out of time. What do you see coming in the next few years for legal advertising online?
Okay, gotcha. That's a good one. So pretty much, right now it's been kind of an interesting phase. So basically, we've got some changes. For the last couple of years, it's been Google and Facebook. It's kind of been like the duopoly, so to speak. I think we're seeing an interesting change because Facebook's become there's been some threats to the hegemony. I think Facebook has been really dominant over the last couple of years. I feel like Google's kind of been losing its foothold and has been trying to catch up. I don't necessarily agree with what Google's been doing in the last couple of years. I think they're taking a lot of power away from advertisers and, frankly, trying to push bad inventory on people to boost their own stock price. But, Facebook also has a big PR issue as well. So what we've seen in the last, probably 3 or 6 months or so, especially with, we just had a situation, Facebook's out of inventory, and what that means is you're paying more for the same inventory that they already have. They've got every person they're going to have in the United States. To go from 99.7% to 99.8% isn't really going to be the thing. So in order for them to make more money, it's on an auction. They can sell the same person to 7 different advertisers. And what that means is that you're paying, $50 for 1,000 impressions, where a couple of years ago was like 5 or 10. So in response to that, what we've seen is a lot of people going over different channels. I think for right now, YouTube's been pretty popular. And then, that's under the umbrella of Google advertising. But I got to say, one thing that I think is like a more or less future-proof investment is honestly going back to that conversation you're having about sales, Ken. It was like pretty much if you can get the intake stuff in place. And another thing too, basically if you have the intake in place, it doesn't matter whether it's coming from YouTube or TikTok or Facebook or some dude spinning a sign in front of your office. If you have a process to turn somebody who's interested into a closed client, and not just a Glenn Gary lead, if you can close somebody who has a need, that's really the best stuff. When you get to the point where you don't even care, a good lead is somebody who's interested. Somebody who filled out a form is a good lead. When you can get to that point, you have that level of confidence, you will be proof. It doesn't matter what comes from there. You'll make money on anything.
It's funny. I predicted this last year. I thought, it's coming. I think it's here. What you're telling me, I think it's already here. I think YouTube and video, I think I'm really pushing all our members to really start using more videos, because you can repurpose them on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, your website. You can even put them on LinkedIn. I mean, you can put them so many places, Twitter. And I just think that, especially YouTube, and we've got some lawyers now that are experimenting with YouTube ads. Mm-hmm. in our group, and starting to see some turn. So I think you're onto something, and I really do. I think it's, I think you're right on point, my friend.
Thank you.
So
yeah.
Anybody wants to contact you, how can they get up with you, Jan?
Okay, awesome. So I would say if you're an estate planning attorney, I would definitely recommend checking us out at CaseFuel.com. And then one thing I'll actually make to anyone who's listening to this, basically, we're also, if you guys are into the intake conversation, we've kind of we're trying to get a community around this. It's, nothing impressive. I think at the time we're recording around 50 members, but it's called Double Your Case Files. So we're talking about, just honestly, a proactive, iterative approach to seeing what's happening in your intake process and figuring out ways to do it together. So that's at facebook.com/groups/double your case files. And I think if you wind up on the CaseFuel website, there's a couple ways to get there as well, but CaseFuel.com is the way to do it, or connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to accept anyone who asks.
Okay, good deal. As always, it's a pleasure talking to you. Taught me some more good stuff today. I appreciate it. And I hope to catch you up soon.
All right. Sounds good, Ken. All right. Thank you.
Until next time, this is Ken Hardison, dedicated to your success.
You have been listening to the Grow Your Law Firm podcast, the podcast that leads lawyers to more growth, profit, and freedom. Go to growyourlawfirm.com to find more ways to market and manage your law firm. Please leave us a rating and review wherever you listen to your podcasts.